We are all getting our tickets to return to Armageddon for the 11th edition of Warhammer 40k. While the war world has been a long contested planet for us humans and the greenskins, a lot of people's first trip to it was with 2nd edition. Not mine though, because my first introduction to the grim dark future was with 3rd edition. So while we decide how to paint up either side, get ready for some rule changes and of course with some new minis on the horizon. How about in the meantime, let's take a trip back. How sick is that artwork? Even for someone who got into the hobby a little bit after this, with a big break as well. This is still so nostalgic. So seeing as though the new artwork pays homage to this absolute classic John Planch piece, how about we honour the chapter that's front and centre on this classic artwork, and let's paint up a classic Blood Angel. Let's do it. Ooh. Well, let's sort this little guy out first.
Nothing that a little bit of a bio strip can't sort out. Let's dip this classic marine in the goop and then get him stripped for a fresh coat of paint. I'm sure we can all remember a time where our minis looked like this, long before thinning our paints and too thin coats ever existed. And speaking of too thin coats, that's exactly what I'm going to be using for this guy, but just a little bit darker. So after priming our classic marine with a black primer, I'm going to use my airbrush to do a quick zenithal highlight and then lay down my base coat, which is blood red sky. This is purely for speed, as I'm going to be using another technique to paint the rest of the armour. You can of course use a brush to apply the base coat, but I'm just going to be running it through the airbrush. I plan on making this into a series of painting all the 9 Loyalist chapters with these classic old hammer minis, but with more modern techniques to see how they turn out. So be sure to subscribe. But now that our base coat is on, I'm going to move on to the mighty makeup egg, or beauty blender, to start applying our next colours.
This is one technique that I've absolutely loved using since getting back into the hobby, but in all honesty, I never use it as much as I should. It allows you to get some really nice volumes of highlights without having to use an airbrush, which I know not everybody has got the access to.
What I want to create is some shadows and volumes of light on the mini, so I'll start by mixing my original base coat of blood red sky with our next colour, which is flare red. We want to soak our egg in water and give it a dry with a towel. I'm using a wet palette so I can keep some of these mixes fresh for the entire painting session. Once we've got the desired mix between both colours, it's time to load up our egg. You're going to want to dab off most of the paint onto a paper towel, and when I am using a sponge technique like this, I actually like to use gloves because you can test how much paint is actually coming off. We want to then cover about 80% of the mini with this colour, leaving recesses in the darkest areas with our original base coat. Now, with Space Marines who've got these big chunky shoulder pads, I like to leave the bottom corners a little bit darker too. Especially with a Marine who has them facing directly down like these old ones, but with something a little bit more modern, say something like a Primaris Marine who are in a much more dynamic pose, you can focus on where the light would hit, which here's a little bit of a spoiler of how the Marine will look when it is finished. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty happy with how this kit bash turned out. So now that our next coat is on, we can start applying straight flare red to the mini, making sure to paint within the coat that we just did, starting to focus on the more upper facing sections of the Marine, like the top of the head, the shoulders and the arms. Now don't worry about all the other details, we will sort these out with a brush later, so overspill, all that sort of stuff, we can sort that out. I'm really enjoying how this is actually starting to come out just now, and it has got me thinking that I'm going to paint the Space Marines of the 11th edition box set as Blood Angels, but you can let me know what you're going to do your Space Marines as in the comments below.
Now, if you're just looking for tabletop standard, then this is where you can stop, but I'm going to add an extra couple of colours just to really pop the contrast.
I'm going to use the same method as before, but mix in some Diablo red with the flare red, and again, paint this into smaller sections and where the light would hit. Then, with a little bit of straight Diablo red, I'm only going to hit the upmost facing sections and be sure to keep within the sections that I've painted. We're really not doing much, just a couple of passes with the sponge, but I think this adds a lot to the overall contrast of the mini. It still keeps the red red, so he looks like a proper Blood Angel. Before we move on to any other colour, I think it's worth throwing a couple of edge highlights on him to help some of those shapes stand out. We're not looking for box art level here, just one edge highlight with our flare red and Diablo red mix will do the job, just picking out those key shapes.
I've really been enjoying working with these paints. The Tooth and Coats paints have got a great coverage and they just feel really, really good to paint with. And even the Dark Arts variants that are meant to be a little bit more desaturated have just got a really good pop to them. It's also just something about these classic Space Marines as well. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the Primaris Marines and all their accessories and all their cool flair, but yeah, just, you know, powering through some of these classic ones that are just a bit no frills, you just get the paint on and you're nearly there.
While stripping the paint off, I was actually able to get the gun off, so I've got full access to the chest Aquila here. And what I'm going to do is actually a really basic version of non-metallic metal. Yo, Editor Kieran here. So while filming the next few bits like the chest Aquila and the shoulder trim and stuff, and actually some of the metals, my dumbass floppy fringe actually got in the way of the camera the entire time. So I am going to skip over some of those parts in this video. Luckily, it's not the only time that I'm going to be painting black shoulder trim or gold kinda non-metallic metal on the chest, so look forward to that in future videos. But let's get to the parts where my hair isn't in the way. Now, there's no crazy blends or anything like that used here, but it does give off the impression of gold, and after all, that's what we want. Black for the shoulder trim with a simple highlight along with the gun casing, and then brown with some scratchy highlights for all the satchels and leather bits. For the silvers, let's use an Action Metallic paint, which is ironclad silver that comes in the Dark Arts set. This is a dark and dingy silver which looks amazing, but what's a metallic without a classic Nuln Oil wash? Stepping out of the Dark Arts set, I'm going to use Stormhost Silver to highlight some of those metallic parts to help them pop. You might have noticed as well, I blocked in one of the knees with the black just to give it a little bit of visual interest. Last thing is the eye lenses, which I'm going to use the white ink with the Dark Arts set and then use a moot green with contrast medium to give it that classic Blood Angels look. Lay down some texture paste and then super glue a couple of rocks to it. While that's drying, I'm going to move on to the decals because we'll go back and make this a kind of desert inspired Baal base. Because Blood Angels, you know? One of the things that I really enjoy about this scheme, and even just these smaller Marines as well, is you can get it done super quick. Like, this only took me about an afternoon, and especially if you've got an army full of these guys, then you don't want to be spending like Golden Demon levels of time on them. You just want them looking great on the table, ready to win some games for you. So, with all our final details there and the rim painted, this son of Sanguinius is ready to run riot on Armageddon and hopefully avoid the Black Rage.
And there we have it, 1 of 9 done. Blood Angels have joined the ranks, and it seems very fitting seeing as though they are the poster boys for 11th edition. But of course, we've got another 8 chapters still to cover, so why don't you let me know down in the comments which one you would like me to cover next. Previous poster boys like the Ultramarines or something like the Imperial Fists. While you're down there letting me know, give me a subscribe and a like because you can keep up with this challenge as I move forward. And you can keep up with everything that I'm doing over on my Instagram, which is Stacked Overdrive Painting. But thanks for checking out the video, and I'll catch you guys next time.